It's November 14th. We're about to head into week 11.
Wow.
Feels great.
Yeah.
Feels great. We've got some good matchups this week. We didn't have great ones last week. We got some good ones this week. We've got some good news, too. Some things to discuss. And a Monday night game that we haven't talked about yet, which had a lot of interesting kind of parts of it, both the quarterback play, what it means for the playoff picture, and what it kind of says about how teams are constructed today and what wins in the NFL. And then, of course, lock of the week.
Is the week that much better though? I think we're, because last week's NFL games were very compelling, but from a betting perspective, there was very little value on the board. I think this week there's value on the board, which is what makes it better. Yeah.
No, they're just better.
You think
it's
so?
Okay. I understand that you have to have value to feel good about it, but I'm just excited to watch about 4 or 5 of these games, and I wasn't last week. There was really like 2 that I was excited about last week, but I think
Jets, Washington being the first one.
Yeah, exactly. Buffalo, Miami. That's where you're talking about the value. Okay, we'll get there in a second. We're not going to talk about the ethics of the Colin Kaepernick thing, but I'm curious which team could get the most out of him right now?
Right now, Ravens.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, because, well, he's played with Greg Roman, and
so he's going to serve as a backup?
Yeah. I think right now a discussion only starts with him being a backup quarterback for a team. You know, because like he's not coming in. 3 years off.
Yeah,
it's tough, but he could certainly be a backup. And I think that if he were a backup for a team where they accentuated his strengths, that would be obviously the best.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because I just don't know if the return on investment for a backup quarterback is there.
Yeah, I mean, veteran minimum, though. I mean, they're paying.
Oh, I'm not talking about the money. I'm talking about how much you have to take on from a media perspective to bring him on, because it's just become such a big story. Certainly, he deserves to be a backup somewhere, given that Brian Hoyer is out there tossing interceptions left and right. But
Luke Falk started games this year.
Yeah, but it's just a significant investment as far as.
But what if you're a team that has a good culture like the Ravens, and you're like, look, like let's have the media focus on our backup quarterback and not the fact that we could be the best team in the AFC.
I think that's worse for you.
Okay.
Yeah. I also.
What if it was
is RG3 that much worse than Colin Kaepernick right now?
No, I don't think so. Yeah. But what if it was a team that had, and I hate to call this a distraction, but like, what if it was a team that had other distractions that, like, and this is cynical, but like if you're Washington, your team is just an absolute dumpster.
Yeah.
Head coach fired, Trent Williams stuff, right? Adrian Peterson's
that's one that I think makes the most sense, because Dwayne Haskins does not look great, and maybe he
hasn't even earned the H in his name yet.
Exactly. Another one that I could see where he might serve a legitimate backup role would be in Houston, actually, because
who is their backup?
Exactly.
Yeah. And
their backup, RG3, can be some sort of facsimile of Lamar Jackson. There's no one that who even is it? I'm not even sure. But that player that comes in for Deshaun Watson isn't going to fill any sort of Deshaun Watson-ness, right? And at least Colin Kaepernick has the mobility to where you could still run some of the the quarterback run plays that can make up for the fact that he can't throw the ball as well as the starter, which obviously no backup is going to. All right. I said I'd give you 30 seconds to talk about this. The labor agreement the new labor agreement might include a 17-game schedule. 30 seconds, go.
Well, I think this is drastic implication for betting in the NFL. We've seen this year how backup quarterbacks can influence and take away value from betting lines because of the uncertainty. It can add value too. I think it also widens the distance between schedules in terms of strength of schedule, because right now the difference between where you finish in the standings is just 2 games a year, and not be 3. And it also screws everything, because everything in the NFL is a power of 2. 32 teams, 16 in each conference, 4 in each division, 16 games. Like, I think it's a bad decision. Now, if each team played 17 games, I would watch all of them, but Yeah, I'm not for it, but it'll be interesting to see if they actually get it through.
Great. I don't think it matters all that much. I don't think it goes through. I don't like the idea of adding just one more game. I think it's stupid.
Well, and it screws with all of
there's so many the records, all this different stuff. It's just
unreal.
Why for one more game? One of the best things the NFL has going for it is that it has a scarcity of games. Why add more?
Yeah.
Anyways, we move forward. Let's talk about the Monday Night Football game and start at the end. Kyle Shanahan has a chance to basically ensure a tie at the end of overtime. All he really has to do is have one play that keeps the clock running in his first set of downs.
Correct.
And the Niners, without George Kittle, without Emmanuel Sanders, with a quarterback that to that point had, I think it was 4 or 5, maybe 4 turnover-worthy plays at that point. He ended up with 5. They throw the ball 3 straight times. And people are kind of going crazy because, well, if he plays for a tie, this might help them down the road. I sort of disagree with both of those, but I'm curious what you think about it.
Well, first and foremost, the NFL is an entertainment business. So the idea that I don't think the league long-term benefits from teams playing for ties.
No.
So that's something. The other thing is that the probability, so let's just be simple here. Let's assume that Jimmy G is as bad as he was on Monday Night Football, and his receivers also. Let's just say the passing game. 50-50 passes. The probability that all 3 are incomplete is 12.5%. So we're talking about a tail event here, and then the fact of the matter is, and then you need a kind of a not great punt, and then you need Seattle to play really well offensively, and then you need a kicker who frankly has not been very good this year to squeak a kick through the right upright. So basically everything went wrong for San Francisco after that point. And so part of me does think, okay, look at the schedule and everything like that, and a tie would benefit them. But
explain that. Explain how the tie benefits them that much.
Well, I think they're 2 games up in the loss column versus now they're just a half a game up total.
Yeah, but their schedule is right. I mean,
it gives them a half a game of wiggle room.
Sure. And
it also avoids the tiebreaker scenarios that are sort of unpredictable. If you have a tie, then basically, I mean, honestly, it basically brings the game down to, okay, we either win out or we have to win against Seattle in Seattle is kind of how it goes. Whereas now, I mean, if Seattle drops, let's say, Green Bay, Baltimore, New Orleans, now they're at 4, they're at 4 losses, and Seattle, they still have a tough schedule as well, but I think it just gives them a little bit of leeway. So I agree with the point that the tie would benefit San Francisco more than Seattle. It would benefit Seattle with respect to the division.
Yeah, it's all about the schedule, which is exactly what you brought up. Because San Francisco has that Green Bay and then 2 road games, Baltimore, New Orleans, it's really feasible that they lose all of those games. So instead of going into Seattle maybe 12-3, they could legitimately go in there with 4 losses. And Seattle has at Philly, then Minnesota, but then the next 3 games are Rams, Panthers, Cardinals. So there is a really good shot, for Seattle to win against either Philly or Minnesota and be in the driver's seat heading into the home game in Week 17. And that's not something that you want as a team that started 8-0 if you're the Niners. Going back to those last set of 3 plays, I went back and rewatched them because, to me, the thing that bothered me was I had a memory of them going deep on those plays. And that first play they ran was really a run play. It was an easy completion, and I believe it was Kendrick Bourne just totally...
There are no easy completions when your receivers are Kendrick Bourne.
I mean, it was a disaster in terms of a drop, one of the worst that you could possibly imagine. So I do think that San Francisco had that in their mind, and that's why they tried to get that easy completion. But they played to win the game, and I agree with you. I would rather watch that than watching a team. After I've invested that much time and I'm peeling my eyes open, the last thing I want to see is the culmination of this be some team just say, you know what, screw it.
Well, and that's the point of this entire exercise. I mean, we work in football. That's where our careers are. But at the end of the day, we have to peel peel back the onion and say this is entertainment, and there's like the morality of the situation, what's right and wrong, is like secondary to the fact that like 2 years ago people were wondering if the NFL was going to die because of stupid like TV ratings that weren't really tied to reality. But like you can't do that, right? You can't, if you're the NFL, you make enough mistakes already. You can't encourage a system that has teams play for ties. Now, to that point though, should we even reevaluate what the overtime is in the NFL? Like, why did you reduce it to, like, of all the things that would reduce injuries in the NFL, reducing overtime from 15 minutes to 10 was a really bad decision, in my opinion. It causes games like this, right, where there's going to be more ties, and ties are sort of this thing where it's like it's very unsatisfying at the end. Well, I'm not saying add a second overtime, but
I don't know if you're aware of this, but when there's a tie, no one wins.
Right. But the other thing is, okay, I get adding.
There's no winners.
I get
adding. It sucks. That's literally why you play sports, is to win, and a tie is the absence of that. So it's awful, and I'm glad that there is some sense of morality that coaches have to play for a win, since that's the freaking goal to begin with. And if you're going to cut it down from 10 to 15, which I agree with you, is not great. At least we still have coaches trying to win the game.
But the other thing is that I get wanting the sort of volleyball of like, okay, if you kick a field goal, then the other team gets a chance to beat you. But like, it also takes this, like, overtime is just super awkward to me right now in the NFL, and you'd almost rather not have overtime at all than to have the one that they have currently, because it's this silly like game theory thing where like coaches really show that they have kind of no clue how to go about these things. I mean, Pete Carroll punted on 4th and 2 at the 2-minute warning, and right. If anybody should be getting flack, it should be Carroll for playing for the tie.
That's a really, really good point. That 4th and 2 was unreal. I didn't understand it. And with Russell Wilson, you've got to think you have so many options. I mean, the cool thing about Russell Wilson is they run the read option a ton, but he almost never keeps it. He's like Lamar Jackson keeps it more than anyone else. Russell Wilson almost never keeps it. You have so many options at your disposal, and you don't use one of them. And that was kind of a disaster. Let's rewind now to the kind of rest of the game, because what we saw in this game was exactly what we talked about prior to, which is you've got a very good team in the San Francisco 49ers who almost overcame injuries to their two best offensive players and kept it close, and a very strong defense that managed to make a bunch of plays, versus a team that had the best player in the NFL, the most valuable player in the NFL, and like one or two other good players and no one else. And the team with the better quarterback and the better stars ended up winning the game.
Yeah, and this was something we talked about last season when we were discussing this idea of betting Seattle over 7.5 wins. Was this, okay, yeah, sure, their roster's depleted. Their coaching staff is sort of like questionable at best, in terms of offensive play calling, but they have superstars. The Wagners, the Frank Clark at the time, and so, Doug Baldwin. And then this year they got rid of Frank Clark. Doug Baldwin retires. Earl Thomas leaves. And we thought to ourselves, okay, is this finally enough? Like, it's Bobby Wagner, Tyler Lockett, and Russell Wilson. And then they go out and get Jadeveon Clowney. And we saw on Monday Night Football how the existence of players like that can, like the whether it's like a silo or a barbell, like this, oftentimes the barbell wins because those great players can just make plays that turn football games. And football isn't like the slow and steady wins the race. It's big plays. And those great players can sort of do that. So I don't know if it's a long-term winner for Seattle, because certainly they're more dependent on the big play and the big players being healthy and good than a team like San Francisco is, but it worked on Monday night, I guess.
Yeah, the Jadeveon Clowney is an interesting point, because he is definitely a player who gets more media attention than his play deserves because of his college career, because he was picked so highly, and because of the way that things worked out in Houston. he is not that great of a player. He's a better run defender than he is pass rusher. And to me, that was almost more an indictment of the Niners' pass protection and the fact that they've invested so highly in Mike McGlinchey. And it wasn't a good look for them as much as it was a good look for Jadeveon Clowney. But I do think this underscores the things that a great quarterback can cover up. The Bears went out and traded for a superstar in Khalil Mack. Now, you'd rather have Khalil Mack than Jadeveon Clowney, but it doesn't matter because he doesn't have anyone close to Russell Wilson who can make up for it, right? And so that's the thing. You're going to be an irrelevant 5-win team unless you have a quarterback that's going to push you over the threshold. Once you have a quarterback that can push you over the threshold, there is this element of, if I can just get one more great player or two more great players, that can mean a lot
at the expense of positions around the team. And that's why, for example, Josh Gordon would help a Seahawks team more than he'd help a Bears team. He would help a Seahawks team more than he would help a Minnesota Vikings team, because
you can't catch things that are uncatchable.
Right. But the other thing is like, you just need big players like that to make big plays, and Gordon did
he's literally big.
Monday night.
What do you think he is, like 270?
Look, man, he's like a good Mike Williams. Remember Mike Williams at a USC? Yeah. He's like a good version of that.
I mean, he's
also
so
a former Seahawk, but
he's so jacked.
The interesting thing is we continue to say this about the Seahawks, and for whatever reason they luck into these things, and I do think it's more luck than something we're not measuring. Like, I think Pete Carroll does a pretty good job of building culture and all that stuff, although Earl Thomas would probably disagree. But to me, it's a lot of luck, right? San Francisco misses a field goal in overtime that would have beat them. The Rams missed a field goal that would have beat them at the buzzer. Cleveland made a meal out of that game that they played with them. Big Ben Roethlisberger gets hurt in Pittsburgh when they win that game. So, not to say that Seattle doesn't deserve to be 8-2. What we're saying is, like, they're probably not. You shouldn't handicap them as an 8-2 team the rest of the way.
Who wins the NFC West?
Well, Seattle plays at home in the last game of the season, so I think I'd have to give the edge to them, plus quarterback too.
Yep. That's the scary thing, is I think the same thing, because of how San Francisco faced their first really good team, and it was without Emmanuel Sanders, without George Kittle, but they lost at home, and that's not a good sign, and we're going to see their defense regress as the season goes on, just because they're going to play better offenses. So I agree with you.
If Seattle gets a first-round bye, I feel like betting on the team that comes in and plays them in CenturyLink or whatever is going to be like a value play. Like, if Seattle finishes 12-4 and has to face, let's go with like Green Bay or Minnesota in round 2 at home, I feel like that's a good.
It's interesting.
Maybe Philadelphia too, like some team like that coming in, because I think they're going to be far. I think there's going to be so many like narratives that are way overvalued for Seattle. Oh, they got a week off. They play at home.
MVP.
They have the MVP. All that kind of stuff. And that to me will be fascinating. I have a hard time seeing them get the 1 seed though. I think the 2 seed or the 1 seed. I think Green Bay and New Orleans now are probably the favorites to take those in the NFC.
Yep. All right, let's close out on this. We had a little discussion yesterday about the Coach of the Year, and I brought up John Gruden, and some other people. Bruce brought up Mike Tomlin. If these teams make it to the playoffs, these guys should be in the Coach of the Year discussion. And it turns out that great minds think alike.
Yeah, Brett Favre, who up until his third season in the league didn't know what a nickel defense was, but was intuitively one of the smartest players to ever play, said that John Gruden should be Coach of the Year. That is something that you have said. That is something that we have talked about repeatedly, as sort of how much he's getting out of that team. So great minds think alike.
Go check it out. It's I think it's up on YouTube yet.
I don't think so. I don't think they come out till later. It would be nice if it was. But
they're called the Backroom Chat. I think that's what they call them. We call them the Backdoor Chat just because. And it's a good conversation with myself, yourself, Steve Palazzolo, and Bruce Gronkowski. And Bruce is wearing an outfit that you've got to see. So I would go check it out. You ready to get on to games?
Yeah.
All right. We've got we're going to choose our lock of the week here first. Last week, the Seahawks were our lock of the week at plus 6.5. I made sizable investments here because I wanted to make up for all of the weeks that we got wrong.
It's like a martingale strategy that appears to have at least worked this one time.
And I'm making a sizable donation this week as a result. So I'm pretty pumped about it because I haven't been able to make a donation to the charity that I've chosen. You can go check it out on Twitter. We have both those charities posted. We hope that you guys get involved so that you can root for something along with your bet. Root for something good. All right, we're going to start with Thursday Night Football because it's actually a very compelling game. The Pittsburgh Steelers facing the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland wins one game, and everyone jumps right back in. They're a 3-point favorite now. They were 2.5 yesterday and early this morning when we printed our article, but they're now 3. So with it at 3, how are you feeling?
I think you got to like Cleveland here still. Well, and here's the other thing. So it's 3 even money, 2.5 minus 120, which is what we printed on the website today. Those are basically equivalent bets. So go, with whatever you'd like, But I think you have to like Cleveland here. I think, as we wrote up, the Steelers have won 5 of their last 6. But what have they won 5 of their last 6 based on?
Just an egregious amount of turnovers.
26 turnovers so far this year for us. Second, and they're only 1 turnover behind the New England Patriots, who are the best defense since the '85 Bears. So, and you look a little bit deeper and you say, okay, who has Pittsburgh faced? Well, last week they faced the Rams, which, as we talked about on last week's pod, the Rams are not a good offense right now. They faced Indianapolis with Brian Hoyer, and they won that game because Brian Hoyer threw a pick 6 in the red zone.
Yep.
They faced Cincinnati. That was I believe their first win. And they faced Miami again, got behind 14-0, so on and so forth. Right. So they have not faced good offenses. They've gotten a fair amount of turnovers for us. They turned over Jimmy G like 5 times in that game that we had them in. Right. And you say, okay, well, that's great, but the Browns are a turnover machine. They're a disaster offensively. So can't these two things correlate with each other and imply a Pittsburgh Steelers win? And that's a good point, except for the fact that all these things are unstable, right? The fact of the matter is Baker Mayfield has thrown a lot of turnover-worthy passes, but Mason Rudolph has thrown more as a function of his dropbacks than Baker Mayfield. The drops that, Mayfield's had, the batted passes Mayfield's had, all of those things are sort of regressible terms. And so, you're sort of still buying Cleveland at the bottom of their market. You're selling Pittsburgh at the top of the market. This just makes a lot of sense to go with Cleveland here minus the points.
Can I give you a counter argument?
No.
I'd like to give you one anyways. Do you know who coaches the Cleveland Browns?
Yes, we made it. Yes, we've made that very clear.
Yeah, Freddie Kitchens. Case in point.
Well, here's the thing, though.
Freddie Kitchens as a favorite in a game that now matters. I mean, the Browns are funny because last year everyone jumped on the bandwagon as a result of them winning games that didn't matter anymore. And in every game that has mattered, they have basically just pooped themselves, right? No one expected them to show up against Buffalo, so they show up. Now all of a sudden they've got a shot. Everyone's talking about, can they make the playoffs now? Is everything better? And the fundamentals underneath it are just a travesty. I mean, 12 plays inside the 5, they score 0 touchdowns.
That is what we call making a meal out of.
Maybe they should put a meal in the end zone, and then Freddie Kitchens can figure out a way inside it.
Horrible, terrible person.
It's just they still. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are the type of team that worries me a little bit against the Browns, and here's why. They are going to put pressure on the quarterback. Now, that means they can get beat because they're going to blitz a lot to do so. But if we know anything about Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns so far, it's that they have handled pressure poorly, whether it's from the outside or on the field, and that worries me about this. So I think the right side, and the math says the right side, is the Cleveland Browns, but I am a little tentative. 2.5 is the number that I would go with. Remember, if you want to see more of the sides for all of these games, or if there's any game that we brush over that you want to check out, you go to pff.com, get yourself an elite subscription, And then you can see all of this stuff with PFF Greenline. You also get all of the FBS content.
Here's a question for the total, because it's right now at 42. I've looked at it's gone up, right? And so public likes betting overs. Pittsburgh, as we've talked about, are one of the worst teams in the NFL in early parts of games, as is Cleveland, right? I mean, both of those teams are very slow out the gate. Does this entice you at all to bet something like under 20 first half points?
You know my religion. I bet on things that are correlated with the team's incentives, which are to win the game, and that ain't one of them. So I am staying away. Okay.
See, because I can I can understand why you'd bet over total game. This game might go into overtime. Mayfield might figure it out. Obviously, Rudolph has been a guy who's figured it out later in games. But first half, I think these two teams play patty cake for
sure,
and go under the total. But that's all.
Both quarterbacks have a propensity for turning the ball over.
Yeah.
So them playing badly to start the game could be detrimental to that. All right. Next up, we have a very good game, the game that I've been waiting for this whole week, the Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens. And we're going to discuss this one because on early Monday morning, Houston was one of my favorite bets. I think it was 4.5 at that moment. Baltimore minus 4.5. And since then, it is now, let me check at this moment, it was 3.5. It is now Baltimore 3.5. So I got 4.5 earlier in the week. I felt pretty good about it. The model was kind of ambivalent. Do you think this line movement is valid?
Yeah. Well, the problem is Houston. The perception of Houston is that their defense is bad and banged up.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Baltimore's defense is not as good as as the results have been for them as a team. So I think public perception is, and actually this number's moved down. Obviously, people agree with you, but the public is probably going to like the Ravens here because they're hot. They have an MVP candidate and quarterback. They have a way better defense than Houston.
Yep.
Special teams are better. Coach is better. Blah 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 blah. And to the point that we just talked about with respect to Seattle, Houston's defense is not that much worse than the Ravens, and their superstar power is higher.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that comes into play, I kind of like Watson and Hopkins to keep this game close. Now, I don't know if I bet it at plus 3.5. I think the value is sunken out of that, but I do think that the move towards Houston is warranted.
Okay, let's discuss this game from a more macro standpoint. You got Deshaun Watson. You've got Lamar Jackson. You're starting a franchise tomorrow, and you get one of these guys. Which one do you take?
I take Deshaun Watson. The only reason is I like to fade recency bias, and I think Lamar Jackson, deservingly so, is getting a lot of credit for being awesome, and Deshaun Watson is behind in terms of public perception, but probably ahead in terms of the fundamentals you need to be a great quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Deshaun Watson, to me, has been saddled with one of the most subpar situations in the NFL, the Houston Texans. They have zero offensive line. They have a coach that's trying to be the GM. Now, I think Bill O'Brien is I don't think he's a bad coach by any stretch of the imagination.
Probably median or better.
Right, but he's not John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh is probably going to be coach of the year this year, is one of the best CEOs in the entirety of the NFL, and the Baltimore Ravens are a great organization. The Houston Texans have struggled, have floundered. And Deshaun Watson has come in and has taken that team from literally nothing to an actual contender. Whereas I think Lamar Jackson, and I love Lamar Jackson, I said I bet on him for Rookie of the Year. I would have taken him over Allen and Rosen. We talked about this ad nauseum. Is more of a product of a great organization. Not to say that he's not great, but that is imbuing. That is a lot of the reason he's been so good.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, Watson is the guy from a macro level that I want, because I know he's gonna lift that organization up. But here's the other thing: Lamar Jackson they are taking advantage of his running in a way that is scheme specific. The Texans just don't do that.
Yeah.
And I actually think you could do that much better with Deshaun Watson because he's a better thrower of the football. And so there is actually more, like the defense is going to be even more frazzled because they have to be so much more worried about him throwing the ball. And he has just proven that he is never down and out. The Ravens have done a great job of saying when we get ahead, we're going to win. And that's why they emphasize the first 15 plays of the game. They're the best team in the NFL in the first 15 plays of the game, and it helps. But when it comes to the second half and your team is down, you know the highest graded quarterback in the NFL is?
Well, Deshaun Watson.
It's Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, because that team is not got the great infrastructure. He has to come back, and why he's one of the most maddening people to bet against. Whereas, to your point, when has Lamar Jackson been behind this season? He's been behind. I guess they did come back to win against Pittsburgh, but that was kind of, it's Pittsburgh. But Kansas City needed some prayers to get back in that game. They ultimately didn't win. Cleveland, we actually gained ground on them down the stretch in that game. And then every other game has been basically them being ahead. That is part of their shtick. And as we saw last year in the playoffs against the Chargers, that you can't always assume that that's going to happen. You can't always assume you're going to get a lead, and you need a quarterback that's whose performance is up to the task independent of how the game starts.
Now, I think both of these guys are probably, top 7, top 5?
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson is maybe top 3. It's Mahomes.
Yeah.
Wilson.
Mahomes, Wilson. Let me
see. I'm going Deshaun, I think, after that.
As far as
starting a franchise tomorrow. I love Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I mean, how do we consider guys like Matt Ryan and Matt Stafford? Are they too old?
Too old.
Okay, because I think they'll be around for a lot longer. But yeah, I mean,
you said the same about Andrew Luck, though.
Yes, I also picked Wilson in the same draft, who's now the MVP, I guess.
Yeah,
but
well, you put the kibosh on.
What about Carson Wentz? Where does Carson Wentz rank in that group?
Behind those guys.
Okay, and then of course Goff is way behind those guys. I'm just going through, and then Murray's. I think he still has a lot to prove. Same with Garoppolo.
Yeah, Dak is up there.
Dak is up there. Dak is very much up there. He's been great this year.
Deshaun Watson is number 2, in my opinion, the MVP. Now, it's a distant 2, but I think he's solidly at number 2. Okay, this is going to be a great game. Can't wait to watch it, and I'm happy I bet it early. That's why you should listen on Monday morning. Come hang out with us. Atlanta, Carolina.
Jeez.
This is exactly what we foresaw. The Falcons, they suck. They're terrible. They're down and out. No one on the Falcons cares. They go into New Orleans. They beat New Orleans, and now they have the Panthers, and they're 5-point underdogs. And they've got Matt Ryan, and they've got Julio Jones, and they've got Dan Quinn coaching the D-line. They're playing in enthused football.
Unbelievable.
And wouldn't you know that the math says, well, maybe there's some value there.
Yeah, and I obviously like the Falcons. I think I bet them at +6. But the tough part, and there are some reasons why you would like to fade Carolina here. Came off a very tough loss there, like a kitchen sink sort of lost in the snow. Coming back home, but sort of like if you look at and they feel like a contender in the NFC given how their season is shook out. But right now, if they were to win this game, they still only have a 16% chance to make the playoffs.
Yep.
They lose it, they drop all the way down to 6. So this is a big game for them, but it's not as big as some people think, right? I think that their bubble for as far as the playoffs are concerned in the NFC has been burst already. So how does that play in? McCaffrey has sat out a decent amount of this week with a foot injury.
Yep.
As much as running backs don't matter, they go through him, right?
They don't have much else.
And they don't have much else. DJ Moore has been great this year, but they don't a ton there. So I can see Carolina being weaker here. Mm-hmm. The Falcons, the only issue with the Falcons that I see is Austin Hooper's injured. He's probably not going to play. He's actually been very good this year, and Matt Ryan has looked to him in a number of spots. So that's troubling. The bet I really do like in this game, though, Atlanta, I think all the way down to maybe +4.5, but also under 49.
Yeah, I really like the under. And the thing is with Atlanta, they still have this sliver of playoff hope alive if they can win this game.
It's like 1% or something.
Yeah, it's not. It's I think less than 1%. No, it's very close. Yes. So there's a little bit of kitchen sink game number 2. We beat New Orleans. we could beat Carolina too. And Kyle Allen is just not a guy that, as a 5-point favorite, I feel good about. I mean, I thought he played inspired football in the snow in Green Bay, in the place that he'd always wanted to play. But he has been a turnover-worthy play machine. And as a 5-point favorite, we talked about this Jameis Winston. That's just not the type of guy. A guy who, on 5% of his dropbacks, is giving the defense a chance to get a turnover, ain't the guy I want as a 5-point favorite. So I'm not telling you about the Falcons because I swore that off. I said I would never do that again, and I can't tell you to do that.
We're never going to write up another Falcons game because the issue is going to be, they've covered 5 weeks in a row. How square would it be to finally write them up?
Yep.
Versus they covered 1 game in a row. How square would it be to finally write them up? So, yeah.
Nope, not going to happen.
Yeah.
So save yourselves. Buffalo, Miami. Miami is currently a 6.5-point favorite. Underdog.
They should be.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
6.5-point underdog at home against the Bills. So here's what I've got. Better quarterback at home getting more than 6.
Yeah, my concern is the number here, in that just a couple weeks ago, Greenline liked obviously Miami plus 17 at home, or plus 17 in Buffalo.
Yep.
Give Buffalo 3.5 points of home field advantage ish, so that's 13.5. Now they're 6.5-point underdogs. Let's be hugely generous, right, and give Miami 3.5 points of home field advantage. Now you're talking about, at worst, a 3.5-point difference. Buffalo, yeah, they lost in Cleveland. That's not a great look. They struggled. They did cover against Washington, but they weren't extremely impressive against them at home. A couple, prior to, I believe, their bye. And then the Dolphins, have won two in a row against 2 really bad teams. Let's be honest. Indy without Brissett is not a great team. So, but I don't think a 3.5-point adjustment is all that warranted. So, how much off was that initial 17-point spread is really the question as to whether or not you want to bet Miami plus the points here.
And so you're doing it.
I think I'm doing it because I don't think the Bills should have ever been 17-point favorites against any NFL team.
Yeah.
And hence, even if, let's say Miami's a point or 2 better than they were, it's worth it here through the number of 6 to bet them plus 6.5 here. I believe. And they're so far away from the number 1 pick now, too, that I don't think tanking comes into play here. We actually have them projected to win 5 games now.
They're nowhere near the worst team in the NFL.
Cincinnati is at best probably going to win 1 or 2 games.
Yeah.
And so Miami, and the thing is Miami shouldn't feel like they have to tank because they have so many draft picks that if they actually like a guy at 1, they can move the mountains to get him. So
what people call tanking in a negative sense, Miami did in a positive sense, which is to say the best way you can rebuild a team is with draft capital. Let's get draft capital and then see where the chips fall. And that's what they're doing. And Brian Flores is trying to build a culture there that with the players that remain can bring those guys in and actually be good. Mm-hmm. That is what they are trying to do. It's what the Sixers did, and it's what the Dolphins are now trying to do. And that doesn't mean that they have to throw games. So I don't believe that they are. Next up into consideration, the Denver Broncos are going to face your Minnesota Vikings. It's 10.5. I think it was 11.
It was. It's sort of been ping pong between 11.5 and 10.5. So 11 and 10.5.
One part of me goes, okay, the Broncos tackles really bad. Really, really, really bad.
I don't know why they're not playing Dalton Risner at tackle. He's better than freaking Bowles.
Well, he's better than Bowles, and he's also better than the
Jawan James /
randomness they've had at right tackle. Wilkinson was just, oh my God. So then you've got the Denver Broncos as a whole are not a very good team. This just feels like Kirk Cousins plays really well, and the defense eats them alive. And then you're also like, man, 10.5 is a lot of points. Vic Fangio's a real coach.
Yeah. Denver's coming off of a bye.
Minnesota's coming off of a big
and a Sunday night game, so they have a little bit less rest than they would normally have. They're also going into their bye week, so next week they have a bye. They also have a ton of injured players. So if you look at Linval Joseph's injured, Adam Thielen's injured, and now they have a bunch of players who are sort of questionable, right? You're talking about Trey Waynes, who missed Sunday Night Football. Josh Klein, who got a concussion in that game. Anthony Harris is questionable. Mackenzie Alexander's questionable. So, like, there's reasons to bet Denver here if you have any trust in Brandon Allen. And, you know, you look at Brandon Allen's performance a couple weeks ago against Cleveland. He had 143 passer rating when pressured. He had 0 big time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays. That, I think you can throw that game out the window in terms of predictive power.
Right. There's no reason to say, hey, I like Brandon Allen because of that game.
Denver's defense is good, and I think the Vikings – so Fangio has had Kirk Cousins' number as a member of the Bears, right? I mean, he was very instrumental in sort of shutting down Kirk, and his quarterback was Mitch Trubisky, who is better than Brandon Allen, but not by as much as people
think. So?
Yeah,
that's a bold take.
So I don't know. I think I'll end up I think I'll end up being on the side of Denver in this game, but I don't know if it's lock of the week material just because it's really freaking hard. This feels like when we backed Derek Anderson last year when he played for Buffalo. It's just like, yeah, there's a wide range of quarterback play that gets Denver within 10 points in this game, but like we don't know that much about Brandon Allen, and he could very well be out of that range.
The only thing I will say about this is I don't know if I should have – if Joe Flacco were playing in this game, I think you would have more confidence in it. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure we should. Like, I think Brandon Allen at least is mobile, and that gives them a huge there's no way that I think you can say he's worse than Joe Flacco. So I agree with you. There's just too much unknown, but 10.5 is a lot of points. Next up, Kansas City goes to Mexico City and welcomes in the Los Angeles Chargers of Carson. Potentially
all
London.
The people going from Missouri to Mexico.
The Guadalajara Chargers. And the Kansas City Chiefs are clearly the favorite here. We talked about this on Monday. We liked, the opening line. We liked the Chiefs covering that 4.5, I think it was. And now it's at 4.
And actually in some spots 3.5 minus 110. So you can even get better number here.
So I have two options for you. I have Chiefs covering 4, and I have Chiefs Chargers total going over 52.
I have much more faith in the total going over because there's so much more knowns here. I know Patrick Mahomes is great, right? I also know that if Patrick Mahomes were to get injured, that Matt Moore can do some things here. We already know that. I also know that the Chiefs defense is terrible. I was on the ride in with Neil this morning talking about the Chiefs linebackers and how they're not good at anything. Like, they can't stop the run, they can't defend the pass. So like we wrote this up on the website. When you think about, okay, what are the ways that this game could go wrong? It takes me back to the Chargers versus the Green Bay Packers 2 weeks ago, where the Chargers are efficient offensively but slow. And they take the ball and march all the way down the field for 9 minutes and kick a field goal to start the game. And you're completely behind the 8 ball. And that worries me. And it really does worry me because that's kind of how they like to play. However, when I go back and look at how the Chiefs play a game, the game against Tennessee was an under game for the majority of the time. And it ended up being close, right? It went back and forth between being a 1-score game and a 2-score game. And when push came to shove, a quarterback like Ryan Tannehill was able to get points on the Chiefs defense. And as much as Rivers has his faults, especially late in his career, I think that's what happens.
So here's the narrative that I really like about this game. The Chiefs are the best, the Ravens are the best this season, but over the past 2 years, the best team to start games has been the Kansas City Chiefs. They throw the ball at the highest rate, highest yards per play, most touchdowns scored. They are awesome to start the game. And while the Los Angeles Chargers would love nothing more than to spend 10 minutes running the ball down the field and kicking a field goal to start the game, the Chiefs defense is also going to make it much easier for them to take less than 9 minutes should they get the ball to start the game. So I think even no matter kind of how it permutes out to start the game, the Chiefs get out to a lead. And you know what I love about that? Phil Rivers. He's just throwing the ball up and praying. And that means they're going to score some touchdowns. That means the Chiefs are going to get some turnovers. They're going to have some quick strikes. And the Chiefs are going to, because of what happened last week, they are going to want to come out and put 50 on the board.
I agree.
They want to leave no doubt. Because if they lose another game, 35, 33, that is a horrible look, and people are going to start questioning whether that franchise is a legit contender.
Well, and Andy Reid is nothing if not a person that adapts a little bit, right? The last time the Chiefs played the Chargers on Thursday Night Football in week, I believe it was 15 last year, they had a 28-14 lead in the fourth quarter. And Chargers scored. Chiefs were conservative. Chargers scored again. Took the 2-point conversion, got the win. You got to think that's going to be on his mind. The way to beat teams like the Chargers, who are playoff team, I would still consider them a playoff team, even though they're not going to make it this year. The way to beat teams like the Chargers is to just keep the pedal on the metal. And it's
the way to beat most teams.
Right, exactly. But I like that. I also, if you're somebody who 52 seems like a huge number to you, for the very same reason you talked about Chiefs early game, 24.5 first half is available to you. Chiefs over 13.5 minus 130 is available to you. To me, those are great bets, right? I mean, if you 52 divided by 2 is far more than 24.5, right? So if you want to go on the scripted play scheme, that's a really good one as well.
Yeah, I hate those, but I do like that one.
Yeah.
I hate most of those first half bets. I like that one. Okay, so we've got Cleveland favored by 2.5. We have Atlanta. No, I'm sorry. We don't have. Atlanta's not for consideration. We have Miami plus 6.5 at home. We have Denver plus 10.5 on the road. And we have Kansas City, Los Angeles Chargers over 52. Which one of these is going to help us donate to a good cause this week? Try and get back on a good roll.
When's the last time we had a lock of the week be a total? It was, the Chargers game. But, when has it been a full game total? It was probably all the way back to 2017, right?
Yep, and I think it was Bears-Lions.
Bears-Lions on a Saturday game.
One of the worst games I've ever watched.
Yeah, the Lions wore those, gray, dumb jerseys.
Was it Christmas Eve?
No, it was... Or it could have been. No, it wasn't on Christmas weekend.
After Thanksgiving.
It was. I think week 15. So it was a week before Christmas.
It was. I remember because I was.
It was an atrocity. And even it was crazy. But what was the characteristics of that game? Well, Detroit had a good offense, but the Bears didn't. Right? Both of these teams. You have to convince me not to bet this over. That the Chargers. That the Chargers don't have a brilliant enough offense to make hay out of the Chiefs defense, and I just don't see it.
Are you saying you want to go with over in Mexico City? Because that's where I want to go.
Okay, let's do it.
I want to watch Tess
Points.
and Boog, Andrew, Pat, Phil. I want to just sit back, relax with a little bit of popcorn, and just watch some points go up on the board. So the lock of the week is Kansas City and the Los Angeles Chargers going over 52 total points. Root for points on Monday night. It just can't get any better. The best thing about this is if you have a nice little bet on Monday night, it doesn't matter what happens on Sunday. You just watch Sunday, you're like, you know what? I don't want to get mad because I got Monday Night Football.
You got Monday Night Football, yeah, and it'll be fun. Let's do that.
All right, there are two more games that beg to be talked about because they're interesting. So we're going to talk a little bit about them and where the lines, if there's any kind of value there. And then there are a bunch of crappy games. We're going to steam through those. Of course, you can go to pff.com, Green Line, and check out all of the analysis on all of those games if you want. Highly recommend it. New England goes to Philadelphia. Rematch of one of the best Super Bowls we've ever watched.
Yeah.
Our boss was on the call. It was a pretty good game. Doug Peterson took Bill Belichick and pulled his pants down in front of everyone in the entire universe. The Eagles are at home. The Patriots are coming off of a loss and of a bye. And they're just 3.5-point underdogs. On Monday, we were in favor of the Patriots. The math says maybe pump the brakes a bit. What did we not see on Monday that we should be seeing?
Well, I think it's actually fairly clear that Carson Wentz is playing better than Tom Brady this season.
Wow.
And we're not seeing the fruits of that because, as we talked about in the backroom chat yesterday, they're running too much. on early downs. There's nothing. Our friend Doug likes doing more than handing the ball to Jordan Howard. Like nothing. Like it just gives him great joy. And so that's really curbing, I think, some of the stuff that Wentz do. Wentz is producing a positively graded throw on 30% of his dropbacks this year. Like he's been tremendous.
You know who else is doing that? Ryan Tannehill.
Well, sure, but the sample size is bigger. And Wentz is limiting negatively graded, turnover-worthy plays. He's about 2.5 percent. So, and expected points per pass play is 0.06 for Philly. It's 0.09 for New England. Which, again, if you factor in the supporting cast, New England doesn't have a great supporting cast, but Wentz has been, he's been throwing the ball to Cheeseburger Eddie and some injured players here. Deshaun Jackson has not played for them all season. So Philly going into a bye, to me, has to regroup, right? They went into this season thinking their offense was going to be about Jackson deep, Ertz, Jeffrey, the running backs underneath, and good offensive line play. And it's clear that Jackson's not going to be a part of their offense this year. And so, they're a smart team. So they go into the bye, I think, and regroup and say, okay, what do we want to be offensively? Much like their Super Bowl season where Wentz gets hurt and Foles looks like trash for like 3 games. They get the bye, and Foles had a pretty noisy game against Atlanta, but they eventually built an infrastructure for him to succeed. I think that happens. Yep. So that's the narrative for the Eagles. We already know what Belichick is off of a bye, off of losses of 10 points or more, all that kind of stuff. We know that, and so if you're going to back the Patriots, you have those trend zones going for you.
Love nothing more than that.
But I think that there is a case to be made for the Eagles side here.
Yeah, the case against it is that the Eagles just have disappointed at every turn and are a team that's going to get off to a bad start, and there's probably no team I like more than Tom Brady, with a lead.
Yep.
So this one worries me, and that's why, to be perfectly honest, if I didn't have to, I wouldn't bet it. If I'm in a pick'em league, I'm saying, look, if I'm going to pick up a game on someone, it's going to be because I take a little value against the Patriots, and that this is an opportunity to do it.
Here's a question. Philly's defense has been terrible this year on the back end. They've gotten a little healthier, a little better over the last couple weeks. Does New England have the horses to beat them over the top, or is it another Buffalo situation where it's not a Buffalo situation in that the quarterback's not accurate down the field, but is it another Buffalo situation where
they're not able to take
advantage of the downfield passing because of the receivers are just not, Sanu's good, Edelman's good, but they're more underneath players, which kind of plays into a weak Eagles defense.
Yeah, plus the Patriots offensive line, I think you would say, is nowhere near what it was.
You just got a pressure on Marshall Newhouse.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it'll be a very interesting game to watch, because if the Patriots come out flat, there's going to be a lot of doubters. A lot of haters writing off Tom Brady. Rams-Bears is on Sunday night, and this is a game that I want to talk about for really 2 reasons. Should the Rams be 6-point favorites against anybody?
No.
And then the second question is, a loss for which team is a worse look?
Oh, it's the Rams. I mean, I think the Bears fans have written off the Bears already.
Bears fans are putting Cam Newton in Bears uniforms on Photoshop.
Yeah, and our friend Justice Mosqueda had a great tweet, said, well, what are you trading for Newton? You have no picks. So in this game, it's tough for me because I think that the Rams, they still should have some motivation here to make the playoffs. They're very, I think for them, in terms of leverage, we're talking about, going from an 11% playoff probability with a loss to 31% with a win. So they're very much in the hunt if they win.
Yep.
But the Bears defense is good, and they're top 5 in yards per play allowed. The thing that they're not doing this year is forcing the turnovers. It's exactly what we said. Defense is unstable, and also defense's effect on your wins and losses is even more unstable. So when I look at this game, I think the Bears are a little bit live as an underdog. And while I can see the Rams, obviously, putting it all together here, they have to convince me first.
I think the Bears are a super live dog, and here's why. Jared Goff looks terrified. he is missing these play action shots that just he wasn't missing before. He's got some like really kind of weird looking footwork. I mean, the numbers for them on play action, it's just horrific. And the receivers are not playing as well either. They have 8 drops. They had 4 all of last season off of play action. So it's just really not good. And Goff is throwing the ball shorter. He's throwing the ball with less accuracy. And their offensive line is only getting worse. Rob Havenstein won't be playing. So they're going to have 3 guys that are not supposed to be starting in there. And they have shown literally no ability to have a quick passing game. They run less quick game than any team in the NFL. And so it's a recipe, honestly, for disaster. The screen game has gone away. It used to be so effective, top 5 in the NFL, and now it's bottom 5. So the Bears, while they are very bad, can just kind of take advantage of, you know, the Rams being just as bad and play this like stinker of a close game.
We were, I think, a little bit ahead of the time in proposing a Jared Goff, moving on from Jared Goff when he was playing well.
Yeah.
Now there's significant loss of value, not only because you gave him the money, but also because he's played poorly. How much of a cautionary tale are the Rams for future teams?
It should be a big one. And I don't think we're going to quite feel the brunt of it until things start to go south. If they can somehow turn it around,
finish 10-6, 9-7, something like that.
You know, whatever it is, then and they can repair the offensive line
but with what though?
I don't know. I'm just saying, if that can happen, teams will not view this as a cautionary tale. But if things go south, it will be a huge one. And Jared Goff, who doesn't deserve as much hate,
yes,
you know, as I agree. He just signed a big contract because anyone else would. And he's trying out there, you know, and he has some real talent. Man, we talked about Sean McVay and Jared Goff needing to redefine that offense a little bit this offseason. It doesn't look as though they have, and it's getting bad. And if they end up losing this game or going on a real skid, they're going to need to do something this offseason. All right, let's move on to the games that we're going to go very quickly through. Dallas goes to Detroit. Is Matt Stafford going to play?
It doesn't look like it. I would say, but the books are certainly hedging here. If you go to Green Line, we have that Driscoll's playing.
Yeah.
And that's why our numbers are where they are. But I don't even see a consensus total on this game right now. So if you're just lay off this game, you know, for now, you just don't know enough about it. If you do somehow get privy to the information, I'm still going to tell you, though, I don't know. It's much like the Chicago Bears. If you bet Chicago last week after the Driscoll, you know, report happened and you got them -6.5, congratulations, you got to the window. But you almost lost the game outright. So I don't think Driscoll's great, but I think if you get anything like near a touchdown here with the Cowboys and you bet it, I think you're mistaken.
Agreed. Moving on. New Orleans goes to Tampa Bay. The New Orleans Saints are 5.5-point favorites. And the narrative we talked about on Monday morning was that, look, the Saints, they just lost in an embarrassing fashion to the Atlanta Falcons. This is a game that they come out and just stomp all over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. At the same time, Tampa Bay Buccaneers are at home. They're kind of frisky. They've got Jameis Winston. He's going to, you know, make some plays down the field for one team or the other. And so I actually think if I had to bet one side of this game, I would lean towards the over as opposed to taking one side.
Yeah, I mean, this game has over written all over it. Honestly, the team that will keep this game from going over is the Saints, because Tampa Bay is an over team at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't particularly like either side. If you have to take 5.5 one way or the other, which way are you
Tampa. Jameis keeps both teams in the game.
I'll go New Orleans. The Arizona Cardinals go to San Francisco, and they were 11-point underdogs. It's now moved down to 10. They played this game close in Arizona.
Okay, here's a question. Did they, though? Because that
was going to be my question.
Yeah, because that game was 28-14. Kingsbury drives inside of Niners territory, kicks a field goal to cut it to 11.
Yeah. Well, who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't? Yeah, I mean, cut it from a 2-score game to a 2-score game. And then they get like a 90-yard kind of fluky touchdown to Andy Isabella. The Niners were never in danger of losing that game, in my opinion. So I think people are overreacting to the Cardinals being competitive in every game, which is great for them. and the Niners losing on Monday Night Football, because this game was 10 in Arizona, and now you're just going to say you're going to make basically a 6-point movement based upon what's happened in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's an aggressive movement. I think there'll be a lot of people that are going to like the Cardinals here. And let me give a little bit of fair warning. The Arizona Cardinals defense is a disaster and got shredded. And I know George Kittle might not play, looks doubtful. Emmanuel Sanders is a game-time decision. But that means that all the other receivers are actually getting a chance to play, to practice at the position they're going to play, which is going to make a huge difference. And the Arizona Cardinals are not going to create the sort of disruption with Russell Wilson that the Cardinals are going to do with Kyler Murray. I mean, Kyler Murray is great, but he's not Russell Wilson, right? And so there's not going to be that added pressure to play like perfect the whole time, which I think helps the 49ers quite a bit. So this is actually a game that I think I would lay off. You have to take one side of 10. Which side do you go?
Well, it's sort of a sucky thing. I still take Arizona just because I just think that number's too big for a team like San Francisco. So
yep, I think we know way less about San Francisco than we'd like to admit. The Cincinnati Bengals go to Oakland, and the Oakland Raiders are a double-digit favorite for like the third time in 15 years. And I think it's warranted because the Bengals are really, really bad, and the Raiders are a good offense. Would you be enticed, perhaps, to take the Raiders as a 10.5-point favorite?
Yeah. I think the Bengals – well, so here's the thing. And, again, we're going to talk about the total here, but the Raiders are kind of Ramsian from 2017, right? Where they're a team that like went from bad to decent, right? Not great. And going from bad to decent, what do those teams like to do? They like to blow the doors off of terrible teams.
Oh yeah.
So I kind of like laying the points with the Raiders here. Green line would not, it's not a above break even sort of a bet though. What I really like though is I like the under. I think the Bengals saw what trying to play Ryan Finley straight up last week was going to do, which is going to really snowball on them. And the Raiders are a team, they run the ball 44% of the time. They're relatively efficient at it, but not so efficient that they're like the Niners that they're just going to like run up and down the field on teams. And so I think this game, like to me, is like 38-0, 38-3, 38-10. All those things get under the total. And Carr is not Carr has been a big play guy, during this season. But what he likes the most is being efficient underneath, and I think that all plays to the under.
Yeah, I don't like unders, but I like this one.
Finley has 0 big time throws. 8% of his passes turnover worthy last week, so you love to see it.
Yeah, it's like something that you just don't like in general, but it's the best of that thing.
Yeah,
this is that. I don't know, what's that for you?
Fast food and Chipotle.
Oh,
so fast food I don't really like, but I like Chipotle.
I was going to say beer, but I can't really think of a beer that I guess I like Mexican beer with a lime and some tacos.
And an over. Yeah, give me the cocktail every time.
What else do we have? We're almost done.
I think we just have Jags Colts.
Oh, yes. We have 2 more. Jags Colts and Jets Redskins. Oh my God.
Sorry, I wasn't counting that as an NFL game. Sorry.
So the Jags Colts is interesting because of the Jacoby Brissett thing. Looks like he'll be back. So the Colts are 3-point favorites, and Nick Foles is playing for the Jags. We don't know a whole ton about the Nick Foles-led Jags. The Colts, though, kind of need to win a game. So if I have to go one way or the other, I'm taking the Colts -3. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I think the Colts get back on track. I think Reich's good enough to get them back on track.
I liked your thoughts there. Good thoughts. Jets, Redskins. The Redskins are 2-point favorites, which I think is freaking hilarious. So I hate all sides of this game.
Yeah, I don't know why I don't know why the Washingtons are favored other than they're at home. But it seems like this number has creeped out. It went from -1 to -1.5 all the way down to -2. Yeah. I mean, there is some value on the over, but how does the over hit in this game? Does it? Like, how lay out a situation where this over hits besides Haskins throwing like 7 pick sixes?
I punt return. I don't know.
I mean, we could get Haskins off of a bye playing a lot better. We saw that, obviously with the Jets at time, so you basically need to get both teams greatest, and it's 38.5. It's an NFL game under 40. So, yeah, that's the only thing I have to say about this game is, wow.
Terrible. All right, that's the slate. Lock of the week, Kansas City, Los Angeles Chargers over. Real quick, story from the Cincy Y. I've got one. Do you?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Give it to me.
Well, so I don't have a locker in the locker room. I just change wherever I want to change because I'm that kind of guy.
In fairness, there's just plenty of lockers everywhere.
That's true, but I'm also 6'3", and I sort of...
Don't want to be... you could take up 3 lockers. That'd be a power move. Anyways, you don't.
My power move is more that I just change next to the table. And so I apparently had one of my towels that I was using was 2 inches away from the set of sauna towels, which people just put sit their bare ass on, right? And so this guy is probably about 5'7" came by and he basically said why are you changing here? Why don't you get a locker? And I said, are you going to be okay? And he looked like he wanted to fight me, and then I sort of looked down at him even more profoundly. I said, are you going to survive? And he continued to, he said, he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, are you going to be okay, or is this going to be a problem? And he just walked away. So I almost got into a fight at the Y.
What this tells me is that I'm rubbing off on you.
No, I've always been this way. I just don't have.
That is exactly what I would do, and I'm so proud in this moment that I don't even want to tell my story because that just warmed my heart.
Yeah, I mean,
you treated that situation exactly how it should be treated. That peasant old man should go hang out in the sauna and leave everyone else alone.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, because no one wants to see that.
Yeah.
The story that I had was related, which is I heard 2 guys cussing out YMCA employees because the sauna was closed on the weekend.
Oh my gosh.
And I really wanted to hear the conversation between them and their wives. It was yeah, honey, I've got to go, Ned and I are going to go sit in the sauna for 3 hours. What? Go find something else to do.
My favorite thing at the Y is old people complaining about young people
working out.
Well, no,
actually
leaving
out.
Shavings in the.
Oh, I've never heard that one before.
And my thing is how do you know it's young people? How do you know
True.
People all over the age of 35 have been inconsiderate their entire freaking lives.
That's a good point.
And you, of course, projecting onto young generations is something if I fail in life, that's going to be the one thing I fail at because I refuse to.
It's pretty special. Also, the pool water was 5 degrees colder than normal yesterday.
15.
No, 5 feels like 15 because that's how water temperature works.
Oh my gosh.
A degree in water temperature is pretty noticeable. So it was down 5 degrees, and people were just freezing their limbs off.
Yeah.
And it was pretty funny. People were getting in and then swimming a couple laps and getting out. Pretty great. All right, that's our show. We're going to be back late with you on Sunday night. So make sure on your drive into work or your ride, whatever it is that you do, you pop that podcast on and get some value early in the week. Thank you for tuning in. See you guys later.